Bring in California Democrat Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, during the last 30 minutes, we learned from Iran's state media agency that the Ayatollah has been killed. They confirmed what the president has said. They confirmed what Israeli sources have been telling us. What do you think of that, and what do you want to see happen in Iran?
Look, nobody mourns Ayatollah Khamenei's loss. He was a brutal dictator who terrorized his own community, let alone the region. But I am very concerned about what comes next. Who's going to lead next? What's going to happen? Often we see security vacuums like this lead to civil wars, or even worse, more hardline leaders or different factions, and those who have the guns being the ones who end up leading the country in the future, which leads to even more instability. And so I still think that there are a lot of open questions, and President Trump and his administration have not answered them and don't have a real strategy on what happens next.
If there was no imminent threat, as some Republicans have been trying to push this idea that there was this imminent threat from Iran, should the United States have gone to war with Iran, or the president calling it war with Iran? He has not come to Congress for that approval.
Absolutely not. Look, clearly President Trump has failed to learn from the decades of U.S. misadventures in the Middle East, but we are not good at this sort of military adventurism. We are not good at regime change. We are not good at predicting what happens next. And I am very concerned about the fact that this is actually going to create even more instability in a region that does not have any, that doesn't need any more instability. That's already pretty unstable enough. I honestly think that this is one of the biggest blunders in U.S. foreign policy, and that's a pretty high bar, right? We've made a lot of mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam and Libya. But Iran is a huge country in a really strategically important place, and we have now unleashed a series of consequences that we don't even understand yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, Iran is also reacting in a way that has surprised quite a lot of people who have lived in and follow the region, like myself. The targeting of civilian infrastructure in places like Dubai, in the UAE, in Bahrain. It is surprising to see that, because that is an area that is very close to Iran, that had tried in some ways to keep ties or keep the peace, if you will, and now that is over. I do want to ask you about what's coming up next week. Next week, the House is voting on a measure that would limit President Trump's ability to take additional military action against Iran without Congress's sign-off. Do you expect that to pass? What are you hearing not only from your Democratic colleagues, which might be quite obvious to people, but from your Republicans?
Look, I hope that it passes, and frankly, I hope that every single one of my colleagues votes for it. I represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country, and my constituents, the ones who actually bear the price of this war, they deserve the president having to come before Congress and the American people and explain what his plan is, explain what his strategy is, explain why this is in U.S. national security interest, and so far he has done none of that. My constituents, our service members, deserve a real debate and deserve to have the Constitution followed that says that no one individual can actually make the decision to take our country to war. It has to be the United States Congress.
Do you think if it does pass through the House that it has any chance of being passed by the Senate and ultimately signed by President Trump?
Look, I think there is a good chance because, again, whatever you think of this military operation, I'm against it. But even if you aren't, this is actually not about that. This is about making sure that there is a real strategy, a real plan, that the American people have gotten that information, that a real debate has happened, and that the president has to come before Congress as the founders of the Constitution intended and required.
I do want to ask you, you worked at the UN and at the State Department. We are now seeing something that we really actually haven't seen before. Israel and the United States together at the same time taking part in what the president called a war. What do you make of this? What does it mean?
Well, look, I think this military operation, this war, is clearly illegal under both domestic and international law. And, you know, I was against the Iraq war. I was in middle school, but I remember thinking it was a bad idea. But even then, President Bush came to Congress, came to the UN Security Council to make his case. He got allies on board. President Trump has done none of those things. And so, you know, in many ways, I think this is going to turn out even worse because we don't even have our allies supporting this. We don't even have even the fake imprimatur of a congressional vote, right? Like, this is really, really dangerous and concerning, and I'm really, really concerned about what it means for the safety of our service members in the region and all over the world.
Now, certainly your constituents and the families of those service members are nervous today and will be until there is some resolution to all of this, as are everyone in the region. Already innocent lives have been taken. I have never covered a war where innocent people weren't killed. And so this is a very big moment, especially because so many nations in the Middle East are being engaged at this moment. Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, I do thank you so much there. I think reporting from San Diego for us.